He wanted me to drive him to a place that doesn't exist. This week has been hectic. My 3 kids have the flu. The oldest one was first, then my younger 2 caught it. After a visit to the clinic, I was heading to the CVS down the street from our house for their prescriptions. I decided last minute to drop my kids off at home with their dad so they could rest and I could go inside the store to pick up some Pedialyte. I consider our neighborhood to be safe. I've taken walks after dark and never felt afraid. Most of our neighbors are older people who have lived there for over a decade. When I pulled up to the CVS, I parked to the side parallel to our street. It's darker on that side, but the entrance is right around the corner and it's well lit. There was a man standing outside. He walked in front of my car, and I could hear him talking, but the music was kind of loud. I figured he was on his phone or something. No real red flags yet. My husband called me as the man walked back towards the corner adjacent to the entrance. I got out of my car, still on the phone, telling my husband, yeah, kiddos have the flu, I'm picking up medicine at the CVS, etc. In a very pleasant voice, the man says to me, hey, I got a question for you. Do you know where Main Street is? I, assuming he is asking for directions or the location of something, tell him I do. I'm still holding my phone to my ear. It's in a bright pink case, so I'm sure he could see it. Now, this man is standing directly in front of me. There's a pillar and a trash can behind him. Around the corner is a propane cage and a red box against the store's wall. Getting past him would put me in arm's reach. Next, he asked for a ride there, to a homeless shelter. It's very cold outside, and he doesn't want to freeze. I empathized with him, but said I couldn't. I offered to buy him gloves and a blanket, and to ask an employee if the store could assist him in finding a ride. Sweet baby Jesus, this guy's face instantly changed to pure rage, then right back to pleasant. Well, you know what happens to homeless people stuck outside? You're going to help me. It's right down the street. I'm standing there, unsure what to do. My husband is on the phone asking what's going on. I gently tell the man that I do not feel comfortable doing that and I have the flu, which I didn't, and that my husband was on the phone with me. I don't care about the flu. Now he's getting more angry and not moving away from my route into the store. I didn't want to turn my back on him to go to my car, which was several feet away in the dark. I had my mask from the clinic in my jacket pocket, so I pulled that out and held it in front of me while I moved towards the trash can. He looked disgusted, but kept telling me I need to give him a ride. It's right down the street, he insisted. But I know where that street is, and it's not as close as he says. He tried to guilt me, and his words felt threatening, but he didn't actually threaten me verbally. Once I was around the corner, I rushed into the store straight to the pharmacy. My husband said he's calling the police. He heard the way the man was talking to me and said to stay in the store. My knees were shaking. I'm not usually the type to be so afraid when confronted. When I got to the pharmacy, I interrupted the pharmacist and customer, apologizing, then told them what happened. The pharmacist sent the store manager out. Tall guy with a long beard, looked like he didn't take crap from anybody. The police had already arrived. The man was told to leave, which he did momentarily. He came back inside the store yelling obscenities and something about me. Now the store manager has told him to go away. He's trespassing on the property. The cop came back to me and told me she has arrested him many a times. He's loud and likes to yell at people, but he isn't violent. The pharmacist had me hiding behind the screen where they give vaccines and left the half door to the pharmacy cracked open in case I needed to get out of there. The cop had also told me the guy's first and last name, as did the store manager. The prescriptions are finally filled, and I leave the store. The police park next to my car to keep an eye on me. Oh, and the man refused a ride from the cop to the shelter. Later, I looked him up. His name is unique, so he was easy to find online. Surprise, surprise. He has a long record spanning 3 states and several counties. Tons of public intoxication charges, DWI, urinating in public, assault and battery, and indecent exposure. I also looked up the homeless shelter. Yep, as I thought, there isn't one where he wanted me to take him, but that area is super sketchy. Earlier today, I went to the corner store across from the CVS and told my friend, the overnight employee, exactly what happened. She kicks him out of the store and calls the police every time she sees him because he yells and threatens the customers. But he always takes off before the police arrive. I know I could have handled that better. I was blindsided by his instant shift from pleasant to being filled with rage. Big thank you to the pharmacy team who kept me safe and the store manager for confronting that creep. They didn't have to do all of that. I'm thankful my husband recognized I was in an unsafe situation over the phone. This man is still out there somewhere in my area. Someone tried to break into my house and find me. This story happened 3 years ago, around the time that COVID started. It was early 2020, and I had just gotten a new job in a small town near my area. While looking for a place to live, my sister offered to rent her house to me. She had bought the house 2 years prior, but she and her husband didn't really take to it, and their commute to work was long, so they just moved out of the house. Luckily for me, it was actually pretty close to my work. It was around a 40-minute drive, and my sister pretty much rented it to me for free. I just had to pay the water and electricity and look after the house. I was living there for a solid 2 or 3 months and had already gotten used to it. One night after coming back from work and parking my car, as I walked toward my door, I noticed something odd. There was a cigarette butt on the curb to my house. I leaned down and picked it up, thinking that it might have just been mine since I'm a smoker. But after looking at it, I realized it wasn't mine, and I just threw it away. I didn't think much of it, and just shrugged it off as some person throwing a cigarette butt out of their car. I went on with my night, and nothing unusual happened. 2 days later, I was once again walking to my house when I spotted a few more cigarette butts, this time near my porch. Needless to say, I was pretty pissed and thought that someone sat on my porch and smoked cigarettes, but since I didn't know who it was, there was nothing I could do about it. I noticed that they were put out pretty recently, so whoever it was probably walked off as I was approaching. That night, I was just watching a movie on my laptop, and it was pretty late. It was past 1 a.m., so I was surprised when I heard a car passing by. It's a suburban neighborhood, and it was COVID, so people rarely ventured out at night, but I didn't think much of it. Around half an hour later, I was surprised when I heard some chattering nearby. I listened intently, but I couldn't hear what they were talking about, as their voices seemed almost muffled and quiet. But by this point, I was getting a bit unnerved, so I stopped the movie and quietly got off my sofa and walked to the front door to make sure that it was locked. As I was approaching the front door, I froze mid-step. As I heard the two approaching my porch and reducing their talking to a whisper, I realized right away that whoever this was wanted to break in. I leaned against my front door and waited, expecting a loud bang against the door or the doorknob being shaken, but it was oddly quiet. I decided to walk over to my window to see if they had walked away or changed their mind. My windows have bars from the inside out that you have to unlock so that you can move the curtains or look out the window comfortably. I slowly unlocked the bar mechanism and lifted it up. I moved the curtains and was taken aback. Leaning up against my window was a man. He was as startled as I was, because he basically stuttered over his own steps as he jumped back. He tightened his hoodie to cover up his face, so all I could really see was his big blue eyes looking at me. His friend realized what was going on and right away started to kick the door in. He kicked it a solid 4 or 5 times, but the door wouldn't budge. All the while I was staring at them, just frozen in fear and trying to comprehend the situation. I snapped out of it and slammed the bars over my window shut, locking them and running up the stairs to the storage room, where I pushed a table to the door and called the cops. As I just sat there and listened, I expected the two to come inside any minute. I heard a loud crash and the bars from the windows being shaken aggressively. When they realized that they couldn't get in, one of them let out a long, angry scream that probably woke up half the neighborhood. By the time the cops came, they were long gone. The police couldn't find out who it was, but were more active in the neighborhood in the following weeks. Regardless, I wasn't too keen on staying there, so shortly after, I moved out. My sister sold the house a few months later, and as far as I know, nothing similar ever happened since. I honestly don't know what they wanted or why they were so determined to get in, but whoever it was, let's not meet again. Think I almost got abducted. I was out partying this Friday night with 4 of my female friends, 2 of which I had just met that evening. We were having drinks at a club in Bratislava, which is located in Slovakia, Europe. The night was going great. We were dancing and talking. All of us had fun. At around 2 a.m., the girls grabbed a taxi and went home. I stayed a bit more in the club to finish my drink. I had danced on the stage for about 20 minutes. Then I grabbed a taxi and went home. When I arrived on the street where I live, my drunk ass realized that I have no keys and I couldn't get home as I live alone. So I had to call another taxi and went back to the club to look for my keys. First I went to the bar to ask if anybody has brought any lost keys to them. Unfortunately, they didn't have my keys. So I started to look for them in the club in every place that I was that night. I turned on the flashlight on my phone and had been looking for the keys in a mass group of people. About 10 minutes go by and I haven't found anything apart from broken glass and cigarette butts. I went back to the place where I started looking for them. I started to look for my keys on the sitting benches instead of the ground. I've had my keys in the inside pocket of my jacket, as I always do, and my jacket was placed in the corner of that bench the whole night before I first left. People were sitting on the benches and they've had their jackets on that bench too. I sat down near the corner where I was sitting before, and beside me was a guy with lines of some drug on his phone, freely giving them to other people. He had put his jacket in the corner of the bench, and I wanted to look at the corner of the bench too, to see if my keys were there. So I grabbed his jacket, and to my surprise, my keys were right under his jacket, in the middle of the bench. I was so happy to find my keys. I was drunk and started pretty much yelling how happy I was that I found them, because I was getting really desperate. There was a guy on the bench that we have met with the girls before in the club. I will call him L. He was really nice during the whole night, and so I kept talking to him when I found my keys. I even went to the bar and grabbed another beer just so that I could talk to L a little bit more. I went to the toilet to pee, and when I came back, L had found himself an acquaintance to which he was talking to. So I started to finish my beer while I smoked a cigarette and was getting ready to go home. This is when the guy that had lines of some drug on his phone started talking to me. I will call him Pedro, as it was definitely a fake name that he gave me. I've been talking with him in English, and Pedro was 19 years old and he was from Colombia. He told me stories about how life is in Colombia and how his family struggles. He told me that his father has died recently and he is the oldest son, so he's in Slovakia trying to make some money for the family. He even showed me photos of him and his family back in Colombia. I sympathized with Pedro, and I was feeling very sorry for him. After about 20 minutes, Ellis scored with the girl that he met, and he said that they're going home. He asked Pedro if he has any MDMA on him, and he sold some to them, so El left with the girl. People around the bench saw what was going on, and so they wanted some drugs too. So he started to make lines on his phone again. I told Pedro that I'm going home and wished him the best of luck, grabbed my jacket, and started walking. This is when Pedro called out to me and stopped me. He said that it's late and he should also go back to the hotel. He scratched the drugs from his phone onto the table, took his belongings, and told the people they can finish whatever was left. Me and Pedro walked out of the underground club. When we were outside, he asked me if I could walk him to his hotel, which was nearby. It was about a 5-minute walk. He told me in the club that he has no friends and no family in Slovakia. I really sympathized with him. I told him that, sure, I could walk him to the hotel. We were talking the whole way, and he was saying really nice things to me. When we arrived at the hotel, the door was closed, and he messaged someone to come to the door and open it for us. He asked me if I wanted to have one last beer with him, to which I said sure, but I will be on my way once I finish this beer. Some girl came and opened the door for us. They spoke in Spanish as they greeted. The hotel itself didn't really look like a public hotel. There was a reception desk and stairs, and to the left was a dining room. Pedro told me to wait for him in the dining room. This was like 5 a.m. already. I went to the dining room, and there was a girl sitting there with her laptop. I greeted her with a hola and sat down. Pedro came after maybe 3 to 5 minutes with 2 open cans of some beverage. There was a Parrot and Jack Daniels logo on the can, and it was golden color. This is the moment that I should get suspicious and not drink from an open can. My naive and drunk ass overlooked this simple fact, and I drank from the can. I was talking with Pedro about all the drug cartels in Colombia and how their politics are messed up. After about 10 minutes, I started to feel weird, and I looked at my phone. My hands and eyes were tingling. I was quickly aware of what was happening now. I turned on the location and mobile data on my phone and put the phone in a different pocket than I did that night. Pedro started to ask me how I was feeling, to which my adrenaline levels were blown. I started to think that I'm being abducted by some Colombian human trafficking ring. My eyesight started to tingle and the lights were blinding me. My jaw was messed up as I was pushing my teeth together. I have taken drugs in the past, and this felt like a stimulant and a dissociative, which was really weird for me to understand. I tried to keep my voice calm and my mind present. I told Pedro that I know what is going on, and I asked him why he gave me a stimulant if he needs me to be unconscious. Pedro's hands started to shake, and he didn't answer me. The girl at the laptop has looked right into my eyes, the first time that she even moved with her body. Pedro grabbed his phone and started to write something to somebody on WhatsApp. I told Pedro that they did a mistake in the dose and that I'm fine apart from having been unknowingly drugged. I think that Pedro had drugged me back in the club while I went to the toilet, which is why he quickly got up when I was leaving. Everything I said, Pedro rewrote to somebody else, and he always waited for an incoming message before saying anything to me. I started to talk to the girl too, told her that I don't give a crap about what they're doing here, but I'm walking out. At one moment, I remember saying that I get what Pedro was doing, but I don't get what the girl's part was in all of this, to which I was pointing my finger at her. Pedro got a notification on his phone, and he told me that he is sorry and I can go home if I want. I didn't respond to him. I got up, and as I was walking out of the dining room, I stopped by the girl with her laptop, stared right into her eyes, and I held up my right hand in a fist bump. She looked in my eyes, gave me a fist bump, and did a weird grimace on her face. I walked to the door at the reception, which was closed. I started to kick and punch the doors while yelling, "Open this door now." The receptionist did, and I walked out. My heart was pumping. My whole body was shaking. I was feeling both dizzy and awake. I ran to a main street, and I was calling my mom to come and get me as fast as she could, but I didn't know where I was. I was feeling disoriented and couldn't really comprehend what just happened. As I got to a main street where a bus stop was, I started to feel very paranoid. There was a white Mercedes SUV that stopped right in the middle of the road near the bus stop that I had stood on. They turned off the car lights and were just standing there. I told all of this to my mom, and she told me to look for a camera. So I stood right under a camera, which was at the bus stop, to make sure that I was seen. I was feeling and talking weirdly, to which my mom told me to talk to her, to tell her what I could see around me. I have seen a few people that walked to the main street. Everybody was on their phone and occasionally looking at me. One guy came close to the bus stop, and I approached him while I still had my mom on the phone. I asked him what does he want from me, and he was like, "I'm sorry, do I know you?" To which I said that I'm sorry. After about 10 minutes of me being on the phone with my mom, the white SUV turned the engine on and left. My mom came by soon after. I was walking to her car on the road, but I couldn't walk properly. I felt paranoid. Tons of adrenaline going through my body. My heart was pumping so fast, I thought I was going to have some kind of seizure. I managed to get my mom's car. She was in her pajamas, so much scared. I started to tell her everything that happened. I told her to drive around the city instead of driving me home, in case they were following me. We were driving around for maybe an hour, talked about what happened during the night, how the inside of that building looked and all. My jaw was going so crazy that my mom could hear it, and she was really scared for me. The whole ride, I was feeling really weird. At one point, I felt like my soul left my body. I can't really describe it. I didn't feel like myself, like I'm not real. Lights were blinding me and my vision was very blurred and tingling. My eyes felt like they were going up and down at the same time and moving from left to right really fast. I didn't feel any rush of euphoria or anything like it. I thought that they gave me some mix of drugs. I arrived at my house around 7:30 a.m. My mom stayed at home with me so that she could comfort me. I tried to go to sleep, but I couldn't. We were talking about going to the police and also about if I'm in any kind of real danger anymore. At around 11 a.m., I finally fell asleep. During this time, my mom cleaned out my apartment and my sister came to visit me. I don't know what I could do without my family. One of my girlfriends that was with me during that night also came to visit me. As I talked to her, I wondered why the hell I would be a target of something like this. I'm a chubby, beardy guy. Why would they want to take me? I'm afraid of going to the police as our police department and politics are corrupt, and they always worked with any kind of mafia as long as I can remember. They would take my testimony, start to investigate, and then they would be stopped by their officials. I still don't fully believe that what happened to me was an experience with human trafficking ring. However, there are so many red flags of it in what I can remember. Like, why would Pedro be scared after I called them out? Why would he stop talking to me unless someone sent him a message on his phone? Why would he even start to message somebody during our conversation? Why the hell would he drug me without me knowing it? But ultimately, why did he let me go? So Pedro, the two girls from the weird hotel, and possibly the Colombian human trafficking ring, let's not ever meet again. The creepy hotel owner who thought he could. I'm a South American woman, but have been living in the States for about 11 years now. I first moved to Colorado when I was 21. I was recruited by an exchange student program for college students in South America to come to the United States and work and travel. Up until that point, I had never seen snow in my life, so I was extremely excited to be living in a cold, snowy place for once. I was going to be working at a very popular hotel in the town of Frisco, not too far from the hostel I was living in. The hostel itself had its own creepy stories, but I won't talk about them in details right now. So far, I didn't know exactly what kind of job I would be doing in the hotel. All I knew is that I was supposed to show up there on a certain date and time and talk to the owner, a Ukrainian-American guy that was probably in his mid-40s back then. So I show up, introduce myself with the basic English I had at the time, and tell him I'm excited to start working there. He gives me a weird long stare, almost as if he was analyzing me. He was a tall man with very pronounced eyebrows, so that kind of creeped me out for a second. He then showed me to the restaurant and said I would be working there as a hostess. I really didn't think my English was that good to be in close contact with the public back then. I thought I would be working back of the house or housekeeping duties, but he insisted. For those who are familiar with the area, this part of Colorado is not too far from Vail, so it's needless to say that they get very, very busy during ski season, and I was dealing with customers from all over the world. That's when I also started helping out as a server during breakfast, and of course would get lots of orders wrong by my lack of English, which made the owner very mad. I remember one time that my coworker and I were taking a little bit longer to wipe down one of the tables when we had guests waiting to be seated. So he grabbed the towel from her hand, yelled at both of us to get out and stop being so damn useless, and then proceeded to throw the towel at her face. Let me just make one small note here to say that this girl was an immigrant like me, with fantastic English and living in the country for years, but he would always try and find ways to show us how slow, how dumb, or how inferior we were compared to him, an American citizen. That night, after the place had slowed down, he would then act all apologetic and buy us drinks at the bar. He would make forward comments about my appearance and even caress my legs. I was starting to feel uncomfortable around him and would always try not to be in the same room as he was. During work hours, I would be focused on customers or talking to my coworkers, but I would never make eye contact with him if he was present. On New Year's Eve that year, there was a big incident at the hostel I lived at. I was out that night with a few coworkers, but learned later that one of the residents had gotten way too high on God knows what drug and started chasing down one of my friends inside the hostel. While pointing a gun at him, he was also yelling racist slurs and making death threats. He got arrested, but it was easy to say that most of the students living there no longer felt safe. While telling about the incident to one of my co-workers the next day, the big boss overheard the conversation and immediately came to check on me and make sure I was okay. I thought he was being very nice and thanked him for checking. He said I should not be staying at the hostel anymore given the circumstances, and invited me to stay in one of the hotel rooms free of charge for the next 2 weeks while I looked for a new place. That seemed very generous of him, especially given the fact that the hotel would be completely booked since it was peak of the ski season. I accepted his offer and moved in the next day. I was so overwhelmed with happiness for finally having some privacy and for getting some extra sleep before working my breakfast shift, since I was now literally living at where I work. I was used to sharing a room with 5 other girls in this hostel. That was until one night. I felt extremely exhausted after being slammed in the restaurant all day and delivering orders to several rooms. I was ready to get cozy in my hotel room and go to sleep. I was off the next day. I think it was around 2 in the morning when I woke up completely groggy and noticed that the door to my room was open. I could see the lights in the hallway. Then I noticed the silhouette of a tall person standing inside my room and watching me sleep. I couldn't see a face, but I could definitely tell it was a man. As I start realizing what's going on, I hear a metal clanking noise, as if he was getting ready to take his belt off. "What is going on?" I yelled. That person quickly got out of the bedroom. The next day, I told management and my coworkers that there was definitely someone in my room last night. They said I was probably dreaming, or someone from housekeeping must have gotten into the wrong room. Wrong room? At 2 in the morning? Housekeeping? The owner didn't comment on the case and stopped talking to me or even acknowledge my presence after that. To my relief, of course. Nothing else happened. I moved on, got a new job, a new apartment to live in, etc. About a year after my little incident, while checking in the local Summit Daily News, who did I see on the front page? Him, the owner. He had been arrested the night before for getting 2 female hotel guests way too drunk at the bar and letting himself into their rooms once they had crashed for the night. They woke up and there he was, standing in the room staring at them while getting ready to make his next move. They screamed bloody murder and called the police immediately. Was it him in my room that night? I'm 99% sure it was, but kind of relieved that I didn't get to find that out. What creeps me out the most about this situation is that what about those nights I completely crashed after having one too many drinks? You know how the altitude can affect your alcohol tolerance, and oh man, it really did it for me. I'm from the sea level and not a big drinker, but a few times I woke up with 0 memories from the night before. So, the unsettling question is, was that the first time someone got in my room? And how many more guests at the hotel had this happen to them without them even realizing it?